here I have to give you a little understanding of how the planet Earth is put together so that you will understand where religion got its ideas from and how the world really functions. There is, at the core of this planet, a fireball, a mixture of chemicals constantly burning, producing different chemistry and metallurgy, and that core of the Earth is linked to the surface by what is known as a cone volcano. You know how a cone shape is made, and the effect from the kitchen at the center of the Earth and the surface of the planet is done through the expulsion of lava up to the top and then expanding on what we call the surface. Around this kitchen, this cone at the center of the planet, there is a mantle area. You know, a mantle on a fireplace, it protects basically the inside of the room from the fire down below. This is not much different. You have an area that surrounds the core that holds the heat back into the center of the planet, and there is known to scientists a division in this mantle called the lower mantle and upper mantle. So if you can imagine that there would be a similarity here to an egg, where the yolk would represent the core, the center of activity, and the white of the egg would represent the mantle, which feeds the core and also allows things to develop within the core. And surrounding all of this core and mantle is a shell, and that shell is called the Moho Discontinuity. It may not have been there all along, because it is basically the residue of all things that lived on the planet eventually and sunk down through the earth and through the water, through the lakes, rivers, streams, down to the oceans, and became sediment at the bottom of the oceans. The material is called basalt as opposed to salt, and it is basically a combination of salt and stone, sediment that has accumulated around this core of the earth, the mantle and the core, since the advent of water on the planet. So, without getting into too much chemistry, if you can understand that the core and the mantle held this planet together at the beginning. This was the planet. And through a process too long to explain, water condensed upon the surface, and lava was sent up in flues through cone volcanoes and spewed its lava upon the earth, upon the surface of the mantle, and eventually built up so that it became visible above the water, and above the water would be islands at the beginning, and eventually continents. And these islands are basically floating on plates, which is the accumulated lava, and things now grow upon the surface of these plates and die. And since our composition, our chemical composition, is mostly salt and water, that salt then is added to what was at one time fresh water until it reaches a breaking point, if you will, that if you keep adding salt to water, you will kill the salt and you will kill the water and therefore prevent anything from living in it. So the gravity's effect upon the planet has the role of pushing the salt down, and you have to imagine that the oceans can survive well with, say, 11% salt, but would die with a quantity over it and become fresh water with less, that the gravity pushes the excess salt down to the bottom, and it is that excess salt and sediment that has gathered around the upper mantle of the core of the earth, about 3 miles below the bottom of the ocean. Deeper in some places, further down in some places, if there happens to be a big mountain on top of the continent that happens to be over a certain area. So it's not an egg-shaped thing in the way that we see an egg today, because it would have all these dips and dives in it depending on what's floating on top. It can be, I'm told, as far down as about 30 or 35 miles under the Himalayas before you would reach the Moho Discontinuity, whereas in the Pacific Ocean it would be about 3 miles below the surface. So not a far place, but a significant distance down below. Now, if you can imagine that you are floating on an island on the sea called Antarctica, and you enter an extinct volcano and you make your way down, and again, we're talking here, the Ice Age lasted 16,000 years. So that's 8 times the time since the time of the Bible. So it's a long, long period of time. And eventually you made your way down and you discovered that there was an area between the ocean floor and the mantle that was totally appropriate to tunneling. The Moho discontinuity. Hard enough to keep all the water out and to limit the damage done by lava coming through it, yet soft enough to dig tunnels and make rooms within that area. And that place is called the Moho discontinuity. Not an accident that the name sounds very much like homo. Pasteurized milk floats its cream on the top, whereas homo, it's kind of all mixed in together.